Alright guys, so in this video, I'm going to be ranking every SEC football stadium for the 2023 season based off the recent renovations. These are just my official rankings going from worst to first, beginning at number 14, and it has to be Vanderbilt Stadium. Now, I give Vanderbilt Stadium credit. They are going through a renovation in one of their end zones. They're making it real nice, but as it stands right now, it's really not even a fight. Vanderbilt, with their academic standards, with how big they are as a school, by far the smallest stadium in the SEC, with a capacity right around 41K, it's just not a fair fight when you compare it to other SEC stadiums. There's just not much to it, So for me, it just comes in last place, mainly due to the size of it. There's no second deck. It kind of gives off a little bit of a mid-major vibe, but they are looking at renovating one of the end zones. I'll show some of the renderings, and it does look nice. This stadium reminds me of a little bit smaller version of Indiana's. I think it's Memorial Stadium. It looks like just a smaller version of it, the way it has kind of a bigger bowl and just the way the sections are aligned there. But there's just not much to it, so it has to be 14, Vanderbilt Stadium. Moving to number 13, it is KROGER Field, home of the Kentucky Wildcats. Now this one, you've got a decent two-deck approach. I know Kentucky, they've really improved as a football program. Their recruiting is getting better, but this is kind of the other one. In terms of recent years, there's a few stadiums that were pushed for me ahead of it because they just renovated areas, and Kentucky, just looking at it, the stadium overall, it's slightly dated, and it only seats around 61,000. I do like the all-blue seating. It gives it character, it gives it a good vibe, and it is tough because you are an SEC team, but you also want to be able to pack it, so you don't want to make the capacity too high to where there's a lot of empty seats. And they do a good job. There's a decent atmosphere. I know they're putting a lot of effort into their football program, but this one comes in at number 13. It is KROGER Field. Moving to number 12, it's going to be Memorial Stadium, home of Missouri. There's a lot of college stadiums that are named Memorial Stadium, but they just recently underwent a very impressive renovation to one of their end zones. It looks really nice. Overall, the stadium, very small. It does have an upper deck, although the upper deck is like a baby. It's like a little miniature bite-size upper deck version there, but I do like it. It fits Missouri, and again, the renovation of the end zone pushed this one ahead of KROGER Field and Kentucky for number 12 on my list. Just analyzing it, again, there's not much to it. You could very easily move this one down to number 13. We're kind of splitting hairs here, but in terms of a recent renovation, I gave it a bump up to number 12. On to number 11, it's going to be VAUGHT-HEM Stadium, home of Ole Miss, and they've gone through several different renovations. You can take a look at it there. It looks like they added two kind of extra, little sections of club seating on the top, kind of similar to what Florida State did with their stadium. It also has an interesting, roof look to it, looking at those extra sections. So, again, it's one of those that there's no upper deck. Some people like that, some people don't. This place has been a real house of horrors for Alabama. It's got a bigger lower bowl, kind of like some of these other ones we're seeing in the SEC towards the bottom of the list, but it comes in at number 11. I would say its most unique features is kind of those extra sections of seating, those little red seats with, it looks like, suites above them. Moving on to number 10, it is going to be Razorback Stadium, home of Arkansas. This is a very clean stadium. There's a lot of unique factors to it. You've got some extra seating over top in one of the end zones. You also have some tier section seating, and you have the two upper decks on top. I would say its best feature is the end zone seating. I really like the look of it, just the way the section's going and the way it jets in on both sides. And then you do have, it looks like, some type of club suite seating over top, along with the two upper decks on each side. So a little bit more developed. They've definitely renovated it a few times, including one of their end zones. I'm going with Razorback Stadium at number 10. Moving on to number 9, it's going to be Davis-Wade Stadium, home of Mississippi State. Now, this is currently undergoing a renovation, and they are adding something known as the balconies to each side of their upper deck. This is something we've seen in other sports, especially baseball, where they will take sections of their upper deck and kind of turn them into standing room social spaces, and we really haven't seen anything like that when it comes to college football, so I'm very interested in how that's going to turn out for Mississippi State. But you know, Mississippi State with the Cowbells, they have a really good home field advantage. Dak Prescott teams, I remember that place was rocking, and they have a really well-developed stadium. They've got some unique seating over top of one of the end zones right under the scoreboard that I like. That makes it unique. And also the renovation pushed it. I mean, you could very easily have Razorback Stadium in front of this one. We're really splitting hairs here, but in my opinion, it comes in at number 9. Moving on to number 8, it's going to be Williams-Brice Stadium, home of South Carolina. It has a bigger upper deck. This is probably the biggest upper deck we've seen up until this point in terms of the rankings. Really, really good home atmosphere when South Carolina is good. We saw it last year towards the end of the season. They also do have some unique seating in one of the end zones where the second section, the upper section, kind of jets up that I like. I always like seeing things that make a stadium stand out, and for South Carolina, that's one of them. Overall, it is kind of a bland-looking two-section approach when it comes to the lower section and the upper deck when you're just looking at it. So for me, it's going to come in at number 8 on the list. Moving on to number 7, it's going to be Jordan-Hare Stadium, home of Auburn. I bumped it up to number 7 because they do have a really good home field advantage, but this one is very similar to the last one, Williams-Brice. It's got the two-section approach. It has a pretty big upper deck. It has, upper decks on both sides, but overall, there's really not a lot of uniqueness to this stadium. You could very easily move it lower. It just depends on what you like when it comes to, taking in an environment. Again, it's got a two-section approach. There's just not much unique about it overall. So I'm going to be putting it right smack dab in the middle at number 7. Moving to number 6, it is Sanford Stadium. Now, the unique thing about Sanford Stadium is the overall capacity. They added an extra third deck, and just looking at it, I would say maybe it seats like 80,000, 82,000, but no, Sanford Stadium, for how small the upper decks are, for it to seat as much as it does, I love that design. The smaller upper deck, it's the future. And I think the next big college stadium we see get built is going to have a similar design to this one, where you have multiple decks, but they're smaller. And that's the thing with Sanford Stadium. It has a large capacity, but it has a small upper deck. That's why I like it, and it offers a great home field advantage. All of these SEC stadiums do, but it is unique in the fact you can see it's got a 3-deck approach with 3 separate decks there, and they added on the third one for extra seating. It comes in at number 6. Moving to number 5, so we're into the top 5. It is NEYLAND Stadium, and you can see just looking at it, it does look dated, but it is going through a renovation, and could the renovation push it up even further? Once it happens and once I see it in real life, it's possible. They're renovating a lot of the interior. They're updating it. They're also taking out some seats right around midfield, replacing them with better seats, and they're putting in some other lighting and things like that to make the exterior look better. So NEYLAND Stadium, Tennessee, the revival of their program, it's been so impressive, and whenever they do the checkerboard at this stadium, it's one of the best looking things in college football. There's no doubt about it. The stadium overall, again, it's a 2-deck approach. Both of the decks are basically the exact same size, and it does have a kind of a dated feel to it, just the way it's designed. But I do like NEYLAND Stadium. It comes in at number 5 on my list. Moving to the top 4. Number 4, it's going to be BRYANT-DENNY Stadium, home of Alabama. and they have just kept expanding and expanding and expanding this thing. It seats now over 100,000, and they do have the 2 upper deck sections and then the 2 end zone, upper decks, which is where some of the student seating is. So Bryant-Denny Stadium, the one thing I really do love about it, there's just a ton of people. It's just a large mass. Anytime you have a stadium that seats 100K and it sells out, every single game. Unless when, maybe Alabama faces one of those really bad non-conference teams, this thing's always going to be sold out. And I do think it does have a unique design to it. You've got the 2 upper decks, but they're not connected. And then you have the 2 ends of the stadium with kind of 2-tier approaches there. So I like the look of it. It's a very solid stadium. It offers a good home field advantage for Alabama. It comes in at number 4. Moving to number 3, it is Ben Hill Griffin Stadium, home of Florida. And this is kind of where it became really hard for me to do my rankings, because if you look at this stadium, it does look very dated, but I just think the uniqueness of the way it's designed, you kind of have, it's just, there's no upper deck to it, but the sections are kind of cut. And I just think you never see that anywhere, where it kind of cuts the sections down. I think it's very unique and very cool. And also, we know the Swamp, when Florida is good, the home field is just ridiculous. So for me, also you have kind of the way it looks, the overall color scheme, the orange. I think that's really cool. For me, it comes in at number 3 for all of those reasons. And you can see, you've got kind of the way these sections are split. They put the slogans, "This is the Swamp." I think that's something that you're not going to see at basically any other stadium. Something that makes it really unique and gives it a great home field advantage. So Ben Hill Griffin Stadium comes in at number 3. Moving to the top 2, at number 2, it is going to be Kyle Field. So listen, the one thing I always say about Kyle Field, if you told me what is the highest capacity stadium in college football just from looking at them, I mean, Kyle Field, it is just, since the expansion, it's just walls of seating. That's all it is. It's so imposing. It is such a great atmosphere when Texas A&M is really good, when they have a big opponent in there. You've got the massive 2-section upper deck in the end zone, and then the 3-section approach on both sides. It is crazy, it's intimidating, and it's, Kyle Field, it's one of those that's kind of hard to rank, because when Texas A&M is struggling and they, maybe don't sell it out, or maybe it's not a great atmosphere, it can be kind of hard. But in general, if Texas A&M, with their recruiting classes, if they're able to bring it back, this is a very, very hard place to play. And just looking at the wall of seating, when it's sold out at night, it's a very beautiful, impressive environment. And then the number 1 stadium in the SEC, it's basically, I would say number 1 for most people. It is Tiger Stadium. And for me, Tiger Stadium just has such an advantage with the colors, man. I mean, purple and yellow at night, there's not a more beautiful thing, really. And looking at the stadium, it does have kind of a unique, it gives me a Candlestick Park vibe with kind of the lower section, the way it's designed. The bigger areas down there. They have gone through a few expansions onto the end zone. They've added seating. They also do have a pretty decently sized upper deck on one of the sides. So yeah, Tiger Stadium, the design at night, the color scheme, really everything that goes into it. It's one of the best environments. Obviously, if I'm going to rank it number 1, it's going to have to be. But to me, it is the best stadium in the SEC. So those are all of my stadium rankings for the SEC. If I were to include Oklahoma and Texas, I would probably put Oklahoma's stadium probably at number 6 behind NEYLAND, and maybe in front of Stanford, or maybe even behind Stanford, probably at number 7. And then Texas's, I'd probably put it probably the same. I know Texas did have an end zone renovation, but it was kind of botched. Like, one of the sides, it's not even, it's weird. But I'd probably put both Oklahoma and Texas somewhere in the middle. Their stadiums are good, but they're not crazy, in my opinion. So guys, that's going to do it for this video. Make sure you're following me on Twitter. Link to that's always in the description. I'm, of course, the Depressed Ginger. Thank you for watching.